China's usual response to that trade deficit talk is, for one, China runs a big service trade deficit with the US. Another is that we are less developed, and of course the main one is that much of that, the deficit the US runs with China is due to assembly trade. What can we do to reduce the deficit if it were the core problem? Buy more gas?
Well, I think first step is to recognize there is an issue in the trade structure. So, for instance, so if you look at the deficit, so you can not only speak about the huge surplus in the goods and finished products, but you have to also to look at the service trade, and, as you have mentioned. And secondly, I think to improve the problem, to improve the situation, so we can first buy more manufacturing and primary products such as agricultural products or some finished products like medicines, pharmaceutical equipment, etc. And more importantly, I think we have to promote the service trade, because in that area, China has experiencing stronger demands. I think last year's service trade deficit on China's side will be over close to $270 billion US. So we have a strong demand, and if US make these similar efforts to open up more areas, more technology to China, to issue more franchise of the intellectual property rights, etc. So I think the trade imbalance could be largely corrected.
Okay, so promoting service trade. What about the fact that if you speak to economists, they will say that the size of bilateral trade imbalance is not that important. It does not necessarily mean a company is being taken advantage of, or another country is benefiting or suffering because of it. So why is that being used as the core metric? Is it because it's simple to understand by Trump and his supporters?
Well, that's one reason, I think. I kind of agree with that argument. So we have a lot of tremendous analysis and researchers about the relationships between the trade and the trade deficit or surplus and economies. So we can only say the results are kind of inconsistent or inconclusive. So some argue trade deficit is a bad thing for economies, but some other findings could show trade surplus, especially the huge trade surplus, is a minus for the economy. So at least we can say the trade issue is not a zero-sum play, zero-sum game. So we cannot say China has a surplus, then U.S. is loser. So it's not that simple. And also, if you look at the data, I think I have some interesting findings. So back in 2005 and 2006, so at that time, U.S. deficit with China accounts about 20% of the total. Right now, the share increased to about 51%. So that sounds very serious, bad issue. But if you look at the total deficit itself, so from that, at that time, 2005, 2006, the deficit was over $760 billion US. Right now, it's 568 billion.
So the whole pie has shrunk.
So we can argue maybe doing business with China has lowered the overall U.S. deficit. Well, so then you at least you cannot just look at one side of the story.
For sure, it's always good to give it perspective. What about the fact that it's not just the U.S. companies and consumers who may potentially be hurt by all the trade barbs? You know, what does your research say about the harm to Chinese consumers and companies?
Well, if the trade tensions turns out into a real war, so I think both sides will get hurt badly. For Chinese side, first of all, the growth, total China export to U.S. account about 3.5 or even 4% of Chinese GDP. So every 10% decrease, that could translate into 0.3 to 0.4 percentage points of growth. And secondly, employment. So I think directly or indirectly, the Sino-U.S. trade business got involved about so over 19 million populations, so 90 million jobs. So, and if the trade decreased by 10%, that would cost, or that would put like 1.5 or 1.8 million jobs in jeopardy. So, and finally, I think small and mid-sized companies. So, among these, like 630 billion trade, about 160 or 170 billion trades comes from small and mid-sized companies. Yes, yeah. Yes, and they are doing business online. So if the trade relations got, so then I think they got hurt.
Collateral damage.